Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the most dramatic moments in recent military history. The story of how Vladimir Putin's crucial supply lifeline to Crimea, the one he relied on for the survival of his war effort and the symbol of his power, was struck, crippled, and essentially gone in a single night. This is not just a story about explosions or broken infrastructure. It's a story about power, strategy, vulnerability, and how one single event can shift the balance in a long, grinding war. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, it wasn't just an act of territorial expansion. It was a declaration of defiance against the world order that followed the Cold War. Crimea wasn't only about beaches or ports. It was about control of the Black Sea, military access, and pride. To solidify that control, Putin needed a physical link, something that would tie Crimea to mainland Russia and erase its isolation. That link became the Crimean Bridge, also known as the Kerch Bridge, stretching across the Kerch Strait to connect the Taman Peninsula of Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. The bridge was more than concrete and steel. It was a symbol of permanence. It told the world that Crimea was, in Putin's words, ours forever. The project cost billions, took years to complete, and when it opened in 2018 for cars and in 2019 for trains, Putin himself drove a truck across it to mark the moment. For years, the bridge carried supplies, tourists, fuel, and above all, military hardware. It became the vital artery that fed the Russian war machine in southern Ukraine after the 2022 invasion. But as history often reminds us, even the strongest structures can have fatal weaknesses. The same bridge that represented strength became the target that symbolized vulnerability. Ukraine, understanding the strategic importance of the supply line, sought ways to disrupt it. And in October 2022, the world witnessed the first dramatic blow. A massive explosion ripped through the bridge, collapsing sections of the roadway and igniting fuel trains passing above. The sight of flames rising from the bridge sent shockwaves through Russia and around the globe. It wasn't just the physical damage, it was psychological. It showed that no matter how strong Putin's grip appeared, it could be challenged. For months after, Russia scrambled to repair and defend the bridge. Temporary lanes were opened, ferries were used to move supplies, and security tightened. But the logistical reality was clear. The bridge had become a choke point and a symbol of fragility. Every time a missile flew, every time a drone appeared near the Kerch Strait, there was tension, a reminder that the lifeline could be cut again. Fast forward to 2025, and the situation intensified. As Ukraine's counteroffensive evolved, its tactics grew more sophisticated. Rather than frontal assaults on entrenched Russian positions, Ukraine focused on what military strategists call the deep battle. The idea that you attack not the soldiers directly in front of you, but the network that feeds them. On June 3, 2025, reports began emerging of another major strike on the bridge. Ukrainian sources claimed a precision attack using maritime drones loaded with explosives had targeted the pillars under the bridge, setting off massive detonations that shattered the underwater supports. Within hours, satellite images showed the damage. The structure sagged, traffic stopped, and fires burned through the night. That night was described by observers as the moment when Putin's Crimea supply lifeline was gone in a single night. For months, the Kremlin had relied on that corridor to push supplies into Crimea and onward to Kherson and Zaporizhia. The bridge carried ammunition, food, fuel, spare parts, and reinforcements. Without it, the logistical flow was thrown into chaos. Russian military bloggers, usually supportive of the government, began posting panicked messages about fuel shortages, delayed supplies, and stranded vehicles. The message was simple. Crimea was no longer securely connected to Russia. The impact was immediate. Russian military convoys had to reroute along the long land corridor through southern Ukraine, an area constantly threatened by Ukrainian artillery and drone attacks. Sea routes were risky too, with the Black Sea becoming increasingly contested. Every alternative route was slower, more expensive, and more dangerous. Supply bottlenecks began to appear, and reports circulated of shortages of key materials. For a military force trying to sustain an occupation and a large-scale war effort, losing that efficiency was catastrophic. Beyond the battlefield, the psychological blow was profound. The bridge had been a personal project for Putin, a monument to his authority. Damaging or destroying, it wasn't just about logistics. It was about attacking his image. For years, the Kremlin portrayed Crimea as untouchable, a jewel of Russian resurgence. To see its only land link severed again was humiliating. It sent a message to the Russian public that even the most fortified symbols of their state could crumble overnight. Inside Crimea, the effects rippled through daily life. Fuel prices surged, supplies ran low, and civilian anxiety spread. Videos circulated online showing long lines at gas stations and people panic buying essentials. Ferries struggled to keep up with demand, and military convoys competed with civilian trucks for limited transport capacity. In a peninsula dependent on imports for most of its goods, the disruption hit hard. For ordinary residents, it felt like isolation returning. Internationally, the strike underscored the evolution of modern warfare. It wasn't about massive tank battles or trench assaults alone. It was about precision, intelligence, and hitting where it hurts most the supply chains. Ukraine's ability to target and cripple such a strategic structure reflected not only tactical innovation, but also strong intelligence coordination and Western technological support. The attack was clean, precise, and devastatingly effective. For Russia, rebuilding the bridge is no simple task. Repairing such a large structure requires time, materials, and security that may not exist in a contested war zone. Every repair effort would be a potential target. Even if partial traffic resumed, the fear of another strike lingered. That constant threat reduces efficiency and forces the military to adapt slower and less effective supply routes. The once proud Lifeline becomes a liability, always under surveillance, always vulnerable. This event also illustrates a larger truth about warfare. Logistics is the hidden front. You can have the best soldiers and advanced weapons, but without steady supplies, those advantages fade. History has shown it repeatedly, from Napoleon's retreat in Russia to the failures of overextended armies in World War II. Ukraine's strategy follows that lesson to the letter. By choking Russia's supplies, it weakens the entire machine from within. On the political front, the loss of the supply lifeline adds pressure on Putin domestically. It becomes harder to maintain the illusion of total control. Russian media, though state-controlled, cannot entirely suppress images of a burning bridge. The Kremlin tries to frame each attack as terrorism, but ordinary Russians understand what it means when a bridge that symbolizes national strength keeps getting hit. It's a metaphor for a war that's not going as planned. Strategically, Ukraine's move is both bold and calculated. Crimea's importance to Russia isn't just symbolic, it's operational. It hosts the Black Sea Fleet, radar stations, missile sites, and logistics hubs. Cutting off Crimea means isolating a massive segment of Russian forces. and making resupply nearly impossible without high risk. It also weakens Russia's ability to threaten southern Ukraine and project power in the Black Sea. Experts have long said that the bridge was a single point of failure for Russia. When you depend on one major supply artery, you expose yourself to catastrophic disruption if it's attacked. Redundancy, multiple routes, decentralized supply systems is what keeps modern armies resilient. Putin's overconfidence in one large, symbolic structure created an Achilles heel. And when that weakness was exposed, it changed the course of the conflict. Even if the bridge is someday fully repaired, it will never again be the same in terms of security or reliability. Each new convoy crossing it will do so with the awareness that it could be targeted again at any moment. The psychological impact of that is immense. Military planners will have to calculate delays, reroutes, and security protocols that all drain efficiency. For Ukraine, this is a long-term victory, one that doesn't require occupation or direct confrontation, only sustained pressure on logistics. Meanwhile, in Russia, propaganda continues to spin the narrative. Officials claim the attacks are desperate attempts by Ukraine to score symbolic victories. But behind closed doors, the military knows the truth. Logistics win wars, and when your lifeline is gone, your operational reach shrinks. The frustration of Russian commanders grows as front-line units struggle to maintain supplies. Each delay means less ammunition, less fuel, less ability to advance or even hold ground. From an international perspective, the destruction of the lifeline raises new questions. Can Russia sustain its occupation of Crimea without secure routes? Can it afford to rebuild under constant threat? Will Ukraine capitalize on the disruption to push forward in the south? Analysts suggest that the attack may mark the beginning of a new phase of the war, one where control of infrastructure becomes as important as territory itself. For the people of Crimea, life has grown tense. Checkpoints are stricter, convoys longer, and security forces more visible. Civilians whisper about whether to evacuate or stay. Rumors spread quickly in times of uncertainty, and the sound of distant drones at night feeds anxiety. The bridge that once symbolized connection now stands as a reminder of vulnerability. In Moscow, Putin faces a dilemma. To admit the scale of the damage would expose weakness. To downplay, it risks angering military leaders demanding resources for repairs. Every move is watched closely by allies and adversaries alike. The Kremlin's challenge is not just to rebuild infrastructure, but to rebuild confidence. That may prove harder. Once the perception of invincibility is lost, it's difficult to regain. This event also changes the broader narrative of the war. For months, discussions centered on territorial advances and retreats. Now, logistics, supply chains, and infrastructure take center stage. It's a shift that reflects modern warfare realities where cyber attacks, drones, and long-range precision strikes define success as much as troop movements. In this environment, the loss of a single bridge can reshape strategy for months. As night fell on that fateful evening in 2025, the fires on the Kerch Bridge burned brightly enough to be seen from miles away. For some, it was a sign of defiance. For others, a symbol of humiliation. But for historians, it will likely stand as one of those turning points that define the logic of war. A moment when one side's ingenuity outmaneuvered another's reliance on brute strength. The story of Putin's Crimea supply lifeline is more than a military tale. It's a study in how symbols of power can become vulnerabilities, how strategy evolves in the face of technology, and how control is as much about maintaining connections as it is about holding Territory in a single night, years of construction, propaganda, and confidence collapsed into uncertainty. As the months go by, we'll likely see efforts to rebuild, perhaps new engineering marvels or alternate routes through occupied territories. But each reconstruction will take place under the shadow of that night. The knowledge that the lifeline can be severed again will shape every future decision. For Ukraine, it becomes a blueprint for asymmetric advantage. For Russia, a lingering wound that refuses to heal. In war, there are battles you can see, the ones with gunfire, tanks, and frontline footage. And there are battles you cannot see, the ones fought in supply depots, fuel routes, and bridges. This event shows that sometimes the unseen battles decide the visible ones. When a supply line disappears overnight, so too does a sense of stability, control, and inevitability. So when we look back at the phrase "gone in a single night," it's not just poetic exaggeration, it's literal and symbolic. A structure that took years and billions to build was neutralized in hours. A connection meant to last generations was undone before dawn. That's the brutal efficiency of modern warfare. Time itself becomes compressed, and the cost of a single failure multiplies across every front. The lessons from this event will likely shape military thinking for years to come. Nations will invest more in supply chain protection, redundancy, and infrastructure defense. They will study how a smaller nation managed to outmaneuver a global power not through sheer numbers, but through precision and strategy. The Kerch Bridge will enter history not only as an engineering feat, but as a case study in vulnerability. And so, the story of Putin's Crimea supply lifeline is ultimately about fragility hidden beneath confidence. It's about how one night can unravel years of effort, how one explosion can alter geopolitical calculations, and how one bridge can carry the weight of a war's fate. Thanks for watching and staying with me through this breakdown. If you found this explanation insightful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into world events, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Russia will rebuild its lifeline successfully, or has Ukraine permanently changed the strategic map? I'll see you in the next one.